Thanks for joining us. I'm Jonathan Armstrong from Cordery, the specialist compliance law firm. And I'm really happy to say that Tom Fox, the compliance evangelist, is visiting us all the way from Houston today. And it's a really interesting week in compliance circles, Tom, because we've got the next series of leaks from the Paradise Papers, following the Panama Papers and shining the light on some behaviors of corporations and individuals. And at the same time, we've got almost regime change disguised as a corruption investigation in Saudi Arabia. Is that a fair characterization? What are your thoughts on that?
So on the Saudi situation, Jonathan, first of all, thank you for inviting me to be here. It's really my privilege and my pleasure. I would say it's more regime consolidation than regime change, because the changes were fostered by both the current king, King Salman, and the Crown Prince. So maybe we can unpack both of those. We don't know their relationship at this point. Nevertheless, for the compliance practitioner, for the compliance professional, indeed the compliance industry, both of those two events could be really earth-shattering going forward.
And the perception is, at least from the news that we're hearing on this side of the Atlantic, is that there are some fairly major US corporations, Apple have already been named, who are using, let's just say, innovative structures to manage their operations around the world. Is that something that's going to come under more scrutiny going forward?
I certainly think it is. We should emphasize at the outset, this is not tax avoidance, this is tax evasion, which certainly under United States law is legal, and probably under many other jurisdictions as well. So this is a situation where U.S. companies and U.S. high net worth individuals, and indeed other companies from other countries, are utilizing tax havens to reduce their tax rate, to offshore money, and to put corporate bylaws in place in areas which may be more friendly to corporations. This has been going on for a long time. This, I think, is different than the Panama Papers, because in many ways what we've seen so far is legal tax evasion strategies by companies. Having said all of that, the reputational fallout may be much worse than any criminal sanctions or penalties that any government might levy on a company who engaged in tax avoidance. So it's going to be very interesting to see what the reputational fallout for these companies, and you specifically named Apple. They're the most prominent one and the one that everyone is focused on, but here we are 48 hours into it, and lots of persons and companies have been named.
Yeah, and you're right to say that nobody's suggesting any criminality, and in fact Apple in their defense would say they're the world's largest taxpayer. But in terms, if I'm a compliance professional, has my job just got harder as well? If I'm looking at things like know your client, if I'm looking at due diligence, I'm presumably going to have to start and look through the Panama Papers that I'm already looking through, and I'm going to have to look through the Paradise Papers now as well, aren't I, and do a search on the counterparties that I'm dealing with?
Absolutely, and you're absolutely right. It's going to require much more diligence on the part of the compliance practitioner to know your counterparty, whether that counterparty is a third-party sales agent coming into a relationship on the sales side, whether it's a vendor through the supply chain, or whether it's a potential business venture partner, joint venture partner, strategic partner, teaming alliance partner, whatever the relationship is, because the blowback to you may be so great because of the reputational risk that it's not worth the damage to you. At that is one issue that we don't know at this point. And I would also say that the entire compliance regime within a company is going to be more greatly pressure tested now, because board of directors need to ask some significant questions around tax compliance. It's not can we do it, but should we do it? And if we are going to be ridiculed in the international press to the point where it negatively impacts our stock price, or there are regulatory changes specifically targeting us, is that a risk we want to take for literally saving pennies on the dollars or pennies on the pounds for a few years by moving to a tax haven?
That's an interesting point, isn't it? I mean, maybe about 10 years ago, I was with a law firm and we did a piece of work trying to look at where compliance was headed. And we engaged with various people, including a well-known futurist who sat us down and said, you know, in 10 years' time, the compliance department will have gone in major corporations and will have been replaced with the department of the moral compass. So this would be a department that would decide that even if something was legally correct, morally it wasn't defensible. Is this the start of the rise of the department of the moral compass?
You know, I would never accuse the British of being mushy about feelings. But I think there's actually a business reason for this. And I think there's a quantitative analysis you can put on it. And it's simply risk-based. So take the concepts that we use every day with our clients. What is your potential risk? If your potential risk is a regulatory breach or violation of law, such as the UK Bribery Act or the United States Foreign Corrupt Practices Act, then your risk management solution would become higher. And then it becomes a cost-benefit analysis. Now we're simply asking or simply putting that same risk-based analysis on a reputational risk. And if the reputational risk of doing business with someone who banks in a tax haven, who is headquartered in, you name the tax haven or other corporate jurisdiction, is that someone, one, we want to do business with because it speaks to a certain business acumen, or two, is that someone that, if exposed, could come back to hurt us? So I don't see it really as a moral compass. I see it as a business issue and a quantifiable business issue, and therefore one that can be risk rated and risk managed.
Fantastic. Well, plenty of food for thought there, Tom. Thanks very much for watching us, and do come back and visit us soon. Thanks for watching.
Thank you, Jonathan.